So let's go to Acts. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. And this is the time where Messiah appeared to them after the crucifixion, and the disciples were in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, or the week of Pentecost, it's the week of, but the day of Pentecost came, which was a Sabbath. But in any way, they were men, as it says here, they were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men out of every nation under heaven. Now it tells you there that they were all filled with the Holy Spirit. I don't say ghost because that's this in discernment. That's a fallen angel. That's an evil spirit. Big difference between a ghost and a spirit. And began to get to speak in other tongues as the Spirit gave them utterance. And he says, and when this noise was abroad, the multitude came together and was confounded, because every man heard them speak in his own language. So you heard that? The Christian version of tongues is nowhere near what the Most High calls them tongues. This tongues was all given by the Most High in terms of Him enabling them to speak men's language, which they had previously not learned. And it says that they were all amazed and marveled, saying one to another, behold, are not all of these which speak Galileans, saying, and aren't they from the land of Yehuda? He says, and then how we hear every man in our own tongue, wherein we were born. He says the Parthians and the Medes, that's the reason why I'm showing you this, to show you that where we were reading in Second Kings and in the Old Testament, where the children of Israel, the northern kingdom, and the Samaria, they were carried into the cities of the Medes and the Parthians. I read that to you. Elamites, these are all Arab nations, Middle Eastern nations, and dwellers in Mesopotamia. That's between the Great Euphrates and the river, Tigris River, rather. And in Judea and Cappadocia and Pontus and in Asia and Phrygia and Pamphylia and in Egypt and parts of Libya and Cyrene and strangers of Rome and Jews and proselytes. Cretes, he says, Cretes and Arabians, we do hear them speak in our tongues the wonderful works of Yah. So understanding what the Christian world displays as tongues, which is really just gibberish. It's funny, but at the same time, it's just so ridiculous. They go around here spaying that and they jumping around, and in conjunction with what they're saying in English, it's just a bunch of nonsense. Because it's like ain't nowhere in the world the Most High saying that nonsense that they saying. Everybody gets a prophecy, and the prophecy is like you're going to be the richest, most blessed person on earth. And as soon as you leave that church when that prophecy was given to you, back into your reality, being broken, poor, and afflicted. So this is the real reason. That's how you know that Christianity is really a work of not just fiction, but it's a work of deceptive and evil. You know, the deception that goes into it to deceive us into thinking that we're connected to the Most High through the Holy Spirit is just, it's amazing, because the Holy Spirit is supposed to teach us. But these people who claim to display all these gifts don't know nothing. Shameful how ignorant these preachers are. And I read to you where it said the shepherds, we're responsible for our condition, or the shepherds are responsible for the condition our people are in. All of those who are leaders, and that begins with the clergy, those who are supposed to be the stewards of the word. And they don't read, they don't study, and they don't necessarily care about anything that doesn't benefit them. Well, at any rate, this is the way it was. The Holy Spirit told them how to speak in all of these nations' native tongue so they could deliver the message of Messiah to them. Plain and simple. And the Parthians and the Medes, going back to the topic of this video, this is proving that they were scattered there. So people who say the New Testament is tampered with, not true, because the way that you confirm it is through the history. So let's move on. I'm going to go to a different place. I'm going to go to a place that's should be not just a confirmation, but should blow your mind about the accuracy of this. And the fact that, where we at here? There we go. And the fact that we are dealing with a reality that's imminent. The destruction of Babylon is imminent. Now, we've been reading about the Medes, right? So we're going to go to chapter 5, I believe it is. Chapter 56. That's what we're going to go to, chapter 56. Now, this is the book of Enoch. First, let me go back. Let me go back so we understand the book of Enoch, who he is. Not forget about that picture there, but this is the book of Enoch, pronounced Hanach in Hebrew. And this is the vision. He was the first prophet. Now, I don't know if you saw that in the videos that I've done prior to this. We get into a little history of him, and he's the first prophet the Most High had put on the earth. He's the descendant, the seventh from Adam, and he was the first prophet, the first man to write down his prophecies and the foretelling of the future through writing. And the Spirit, we're talking about the Holy Spirit. Well, he was the first one to have access to that and display it before men. Now let's deal with it in concerning this topic. Now this we're going to talk about the Most High's return, 56. Now he says, just for context, he says, Yahweh put signs in the heavens, and it shall become a symbol of faith between me and them forever. And he says, after that, the antecedent of time repented and said, that's the Most High, meaning that he precedes time. And that time ain't got nothing to do with him. And it says, in vain have I destroyed all of those who dwell on the earth. This is concerning the flood. Now it says, Yahweh swore by his own great name that thenceforth, he would not do as he done to all those that live on the earth. He said, I shall put up a sign in the heavens, and it shall become a symbol of faith between me and them forever, as long as heaven is above, which in accordance with my commandment, that's the rainbow, if you know. And it says, and when I give consent so that they should be seized by the hands of the angels on the day of tribulation and pain, already I would have caused my punishment and my wrath to abide upon them. My punishment and my wrath, says Yahweh of hosts. It says, king, potentates, dwellers of the earth, you would have to see my elect one, that's Messiah, how he sits in the throne. No angels have thrones. How he sits in the throne of splendor, and he judges Azazel and all his company and his army in the name of Yahweh. Like I said, in the spirit, three can become one. Think about the scriptures where it talks about the seven spirits of Yah. Saying that they're still him, but they're seven spirits. So I'm not even going to get into all of that because people are so nonsense about trying to do math. Because in math, physical things, no, you can't add and subtract or put it like this. Three separate things be one. It's true. In the spirit, that it has nothing to do with the reality of the physical realm. Two antithetical, completely different places. That's why the Most High tells us to live in it, meaning that everything is about faith, everything is about belief, everything is about righteousness. Everything that you deal with has to be filtered through the scriptures and the narrative of the scriptures. Now let's continue. It says, now in Enoch, he has a vision. And he says, then I saw the army of angels, angels of punishment. Malachim means angels, holding nets of iron and bronze. And I asked the angel of peace, Malach of Shalom, who was with me, saying to him, to whom are they going? These who are holding the nets. And he said to me, they are going to their elect and beloved ones in order that they may be cast into the crevices of the abyss and of the valley. Then shall the valley be filled with their elect and beloved ones, an epoch of their lives, and the era of their splendor, and the age of their leading others astray shall come to an end, and shall not henceforth be reckoned. And it says the struggle of Israel with its enemies. That's a title, but he didn't write that. This was somebody who wrote it, just the title, but this is the text. And it says, in those days, the angels will assemble and thrust themselves to the east at the Parthian and the Medes. So he's saying these angels here who hold the nets of punishment, they're angels of punishment. He said they're going to throw themselves, and they're coming to get their elect and beloved ones, which means these are the fallen angels commissioned to bring judgment to their own descendants. And it says, and these angels shall assemble and thrust themselves to the east at the Parthian and the Medes. And they will shake up the king so that a spirit of unrest shall come upon them and stir them up from their thrones. And they shall break forth from their beds like lions and hungry hyenas among their own flocks. And they shall go up and trample upon the land of my elect ones. Not the elect people, but their land. And who's occupying that land today? All right, modern day Israel. Modern day Israelis or Jews. And the land of my elect ones will be before them a threshing floor or a highway. But the city of my righteous one will become an obstacle to their horses. And they shall begin to fight among themselves, and by their own right hands they shall prevail against themselves. And a man shall not recognize his brother, or his son, or son of his mother, until there be a significant number of corpses among them, and their punishment is not in vain. It says, in those days Sheol or hell shall open up her mouth, and they shall be swallowed up in it and perish. And it says, Sheol shall swallow up the sinners in the presence of the elect ones. And right after that, he goes into this. He says, and afterwards, then appeared another vision of a whole array of chariots loaded with people. So these chariots can carry a lot of people. And they were advancing upon the air. So this is another flying reference. And they were flying from the east and from the west until midday. And it says, and the sound of their chariots was clamorous. And when this commotion took place, the holy ones in heaven took notice of it, and the pillars of earth were shaken from their foundations. And the sound of the noise could be heard from one extreme end of the sky until the extreme end of the earth in 1 hour. It says, then all shall fall down and worship Yahweh of hosts. And herein lies the second parable. And the reason why I brought that up is because this is going to be confirmed in another prophecy that we're about to go to. So before we go there, we're going to go to Revelation 18. And Revelation 18 is the scripture that deals with the fall of Babylon in the New Testament. And as you can see, he has the same vision the other ones have. But back to Enoch, just to bring it in full circle, he's saying that the angels will assemble and thrust themselves to the east at the Parthians and the Medes. You gotta remember, there was no such thing as the Medes. If Japheth was born after the flood, and he had son Madai, then this was a prophecy of the Parthian and the Medes before they even became a people, before they even became thought of on the earth. That's how accurate this prophecy is. The Medes are descendant from Madai, right? So if they descended from Madai, he said these are the sons of Noah. Enoch is back here. Let's get back into it here. Hold on. Let's get back into it here. 6. This is where the angels came down upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them. And the sons of Yahweh, this is the fallen angels, the one that they were talking about, their beloved ones, these are the fathers. They saw the daughters of men that were fair, and they took them wives of all they chose. And Yahweh said, his spirit will not always drive with man, for that he is also flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. So he cut the lifespan down of mankind. But that was a prophecy of it. And he says, and there were giants in the earth in those days. And also after that, when the sons of Yahweh came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children unto them, and they became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. That's those old Greek mythological titans, they call them, Clash of the Titans and all that. And he said, and they saw the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of his thoughts and was evil continually. Now it talks about that. And let's see what happened with Enoch. All right? And you remember them. Where's Enoch at? Creation of man and woman. I hate looking for this because it always gets me. It says he tells you where he walked with the Most High. It must be in 11 then. Whole language of one thread, that's Shem. No, that can't be it. It's gotta be. Why don't I just look it up so I don't waste a lot of time here, because I want to move on, folks. So let's go into Enoch. And came in. Enoch was born in there. Okay, now here is our Enoch, 5. I don't know why I skipped over everything but 5. And it says, and Enoch, or Jared, his father, lived, and he begat Enoch 800 years, and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Jared were 962 years. They lived a long time. And it says, and Enoch walked with Yahweh after he begot Methuselah 300 years, and begot sons and daughters. So this is the only reference that he gives you here, other than the New Testament, where they confirm Enoch in, I believe it is Jude rather. It says, now also Enoch, 7th from Adam, prophesied of thee, saying, behold, Yahweh cometh with 10,000 of his saints. And what is he talking to? He's talking about this prophecy here. He's talking about this prophecy from Enoch, where Enoch prophesies. And he says, in the blessing of Enoch, which he blessed the elect and the righteous, who would be present on the day of tribulation, at the time of the removal of all the wicked ones. And Enoch, blessed and righteous, man of Yahweh, took up this parable while his eyes were open, and he saw it. He said, this is the holy vision from the heavens, which the angel showed me, and I heard them, and everything, and I understood. I heard from them everything, and I stood. And I looked not for this generation, but for a distant one that is coming. And he's saying, I look not for this generation, meaning that he wasn't talking about the time he was living in now, or the generation coming up, but for a distant one. I speak about the elect ones, and concerning them, that's us, the lost children of Israel. And I took up this parable, saying, Yahweh of the universe, the great Holy One, will come forth from his dwelling. And from there he shall march upon Mount Sinai. Remember, that wasn't named there either. There was no Persians, there was no Medes, there was no Mount Sinai. These are all children of the Canaanite. This is named after the Sinites, because they were the Canaanites who had occupied the land previously, before Moses delivered the children out of Egypt. That's why that name stayed. And it says, he will march upon Mount Sinai and appear in his camp, emerging from the heaven with a mighty power. And everyone shall be afraid, and the watchers shall quiver. And a great fear and trembling shall seize them upon the ends of the earth. Mountains and high places will fall down and be frightened, and the hills shall be made low, and they shall melt like a honeycomb, like before the flame. And you read this same that almost verbatim in Isaiah. And the earth shall be rent asunder, and all that is upon the earth shall perish. And there shall be a judgment upon all, including the righteous. And into the righteous he will grant peace, and he will preserve the elect. And loving kindness shall be upon them. And they shall all belong to Yahweh, and they shall prosper and be blessed. And the light of Yahweh shall shine upon them. And behold, he will arrive with 10 million of the holy ones in order to execute judgment. And he will destroy the wicked ones and censor all the flesh on account of everything they have made, that which the sinners and the wicked ones committed against him. So he's telling you there, that's what he says. He will arrive with 10,000 of his holy ones in order to execute judgment upon all. That's what Jude was saying. The Lord cometh with 10,000s. That's why it's a different number, because he's saying thousands in terms of each increment is of 10,000. So it's 10,000s of 10,000s. All right? And he's going to execute judgment upon all. What did he say? Execute judgment upon all. So this is the same man, and his book is valid, and it is true. Now let's move on. We go into Revelation 18, right? So we go to Revelation 18, and we're going to talk about that, proving that the Medes and the Persians, that this event will surely happen. And it says, Babylon the Great is fallen, and it's become a habitation of devils, and the hole of every foul spirit, and the cage of every unclean and hateful bird. Don't have to dispute that. I mean, the treatment of our people, the Indians, this is all displayed. The way that they hold themselves not guilty for some of the most despicable evils that committed upon people and Mexicans and everybody. It says, for all of the nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. And they always talk about the wine of the wrath. That's because in the name of peace, they shall destroy many. And her fornication is the fact that she serves, which is considered like adultery or premarital sex. They are having false gods. Instead of serving the Most High, they're serving false gods. So that's considered cheating and adultery and infidelity. And it says the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, meaning that they believed her gods, Jesus and the whole 9 yards or whatever. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich as the corporations through the abundance of her delicacies. This ain't talking about no religion. And I heard the voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. Okay? And it says, for her sins have reached unto heaven. Didn't we just read that 2 times already? And Yah hath remembered her iniquities. Verbatim. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works, in the cup which she had filled to her double. How much she had glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit as a queen, and am not a winner, and I shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire. For strong is the Yahweh Elohim who judges her. And the kings of the earth going to wail over her. And the merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing. And he tells us that all of the things that we did, he said, they're going to depart from us. and you're going to find them no more at all. And alas, like I said in the last video, this is not a happiness like I can't wait, but it's alas, it's a sort of a lamentation. He said, that great city, alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches have come to naught, meaning they've come to nothing. Every shipmaster and all the company of ships and sailors, as many as trade by sea, stood afar off and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, and said, what city is like this great city? Telling you this is not a religion. It's not some kind of abstract, untangible thing that everybody keeps talking about, its system and all that. No, it's a city. And if you don't think it is, and you're reinterpreting the Bible, and you're lying. He's going to reiterate it, and they're going to cast dust on their heads, weeping and wailing, saying, at last, that great city. And the Vatican's not a great city, I'm sorry to tell you. It's probably an older city, and it's the capital of their thing, but it's no different in terms of holiness. The Pope don't got no respect on the earth. Only the merchants and the corporations got all the power and respect. The Pope, he may have it among the masses in South America and in certain parts of Europe, but for the most part, the Pope lost all of his authority, because it says that he gave it to the beast that came up after the sea after him. And that's the sea having 7 heads and 10 horns, and we'll get into that at another day. But let's continue where he says, and the mighty angel took up a great millstone. First, let me make sure we haven't. And he says, and rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets. That's all it was. For Yahweh has avenged you on her. And the mighty angel took a stone like a great millstone and cast it into the sea, saying, with violence shall the great city, Babylon, be thrown down, and shall be found no more at all. And it says, the voice of the harpers and the musicians and the pipers and the trumpeters shall be heard no more at all of me. No craftsman, and whatsoever craft he be, shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone should not be heard no more in thee. So he's saying that everything is shut down, and being that music is pretty much one of America's biggest commodities. You know, we've influenced music all over the world. Blues, rock, soul, R&B, everything but polka and classical music come from America. And he's saying all that's over. You ain't even gonna have no lights in here. So let's get into the gathering, because that still doesn't attack the gathering that we're going through. So let's go and start with the gathering. We're going to start with Deuteronomy 30. And it says, now it shall come to pass when all these things come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, those were all the things Moses told them, if they were to depart from the Most High's ways and his covenant, that he was going to curse them in every way possible. And you can read about that in Deuteronomy 28. He says, now all these things are going to come upon you, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before thee, meaning that we had to choose. We choose the blessing when we chose to do right. We chose the curse when we chose to disobey and be disobedient and disrespectful and rebellious. He said, which I set before thee, thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations where the Most High, or the Elohim, Yahweh the Elohim, have driven thee. So he's saying when y'all get to the nations, when these things come upon you, he said, there, y'all gonna call them to mind. That's what I'm doing. That's what I'm hoping to precipitate in all of y'all. And they shall return unto Yahweh their Elohim, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, which means that his voice is in the scriptures. Word was made flesh, and flesh dwelt among them. This is the word. And he says, and they shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children, with all thy heart and with all thy soul. And then Yahweh Elohim will turn thy captivity and have compassion upon thee. And I will turn and gather thee from all the nations where Yahweh Elohim hath scattered thee. And if any of thine be driven out in the utmost parts of heaven, and from there will Yahweh thy Elohim gather thee, and from there will he fetch thee. That's an old southern That's where I thought it was southern, but I find that he was saying fetch over there in the land we come from. And it says, and Yahweh the Elohim will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possessed, and thou shalt possess it. And he will do good and multiply thee above their fathers. So all of this talks about this days that we living in right now. Him gathering us from these days that we living in right now. And look at Psalms 106. Let's look at Psalms 106. Let's see if I can move up a little bit. All right. Now, and we're going to go to 47. He says, save us, O Yahweh Elohim, and gather us from among the heathen, to give thanks unto the holy name, unto thy holy name, and to triumph in thy praise. So they've been calling out. That's the first mention of the Old Testament. This would have been David's time. David wrote most of the Psalms. And we'll go to Isaiah 11. We'll go down the line. 11:12. And he shall set up an ensign for the nations, and they shall assemble the outcasts of Israel, and gather together the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth. And let's go to 54:7. Isaiah. And for a small moment I have forsaken thee, but with great mercies will I gather thee. In a little wrath I hid my face from thee for a moment. Because remember, days like 1,000 years. But with everlasting kindness will I have mercy on thee, saith Yahweh thy Redeemer. Let's go to 64. He said, lift up thine eyes round about. Okay, now let's go to read it from the top. He says, arise, shine, thy light is come. The glory of Yahweh is risen upon thee. For behold, darkness shall cover the earth. Remember, get thee into darkness, O Babylon, and gross darkness to people, meaning even the people going to be dark the way they act. But Yahweh shall arise upon thee, and his glory shall be seen upon thee. Somebody's glory, that means light. That's what, remember, Moses came down from the mountain after he received the tablets, and because his face was glowing, he had to wear a veil. He had to put his veil over his face because the people saw him and was afraid of him. Because the Most High's glory had emanated onto his face, and he carried it with him when he came down. All right, so we're going to keep moving on. So he's telling us that right there is going to be a scene upon us. And let's go to Jeremiah 23:3. I'm just going to do a few of these, and then I'm going to move into the prophecy with Ezra, and then we're going to close. And 23:3 says, I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all of the countries where I have driven them, and I will bring them again to their folds, and they shall be fruitful and increase. Okay, let's look at 29:14. And I will be found of you, saith Yahweh, and I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all nations, and from all the places where I have driven you, saith Yahweh, and I will bring you into the place where I have caused you to be carried away captive. Let's go to 31:8. Let's go to 31:8. Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the coast of the earth, and with them the blind and the lame, and woman with child, and her travaileth, and her that travaileth with child together. A great company shall return there. That's the place where we come from. We were saying a great company going to return back. And they shall come weeping, and with supplications will I lead them. And I will cause them to walk by the rivers, the rivers of waters in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble. For I am a father to Israel, and to Ephraim is my firstborn. And hear the word of Yahweh, O ye nations, declare it in the isles afar off, and say, he that scattereth Israel will gather him and keep him. And he tells you, Yahweh hath redeemed Jacob and ransomed him for the hand of him that was stronger than he. Ransom mean that actually it's the destruction of Babylon is basically the what he's talking about here. He's saying that in their destruction, our freedom comes. So he gave them ransom for our freedom. When you think about that, it's like, wow, that's deep. Because they always tell him, reward her as she rewarded you. Double unto her double. Do unto her as she's done unto you. So that's a situation where the Most High is saying, you reap what you sow, and I'm going to get you back. All right, now let's move on to 32:3. Okay. 32:37, I'm sorry. 32:37. Behold, I will gather them out of all countries where I've driven them in my anger. And in my fury and in my great wrath will I bring them again unto this place, and I will cause them to dwell safely. And they shall be my people, and I will be their Elohim. Right now, we're not that. Right now, we've been serving the false gods that they set us up to serve, that look like them, what they made with their hands. So I will give them one heart and one way, and that they may fear me forever, for the good of them and of their children after them. So we don't end, we continue. It gets way better for us. And I will make an everlasting covenant with them, and they will not turn away from them. And I will not turn away from them to do them good. But I will put my fear in their hands, and they shall not depart from me. Let's keep moving. Ezekiel. Now let's go to Ezekiel. Let's go to Ezekiel 11:7. Okay, and 11:17. Therefore, as I said, Yahweh Elohim, I will even gather you from the people and assemble you out of the countries wherein you have been scattered, and I will give you the land of Israel. I'm going to stop there because I got a bunch of them. So I'm just going to end just to bring it to it's not one-sided. I'm going to go to Matthew, and I'm going to read from Matthew how he talks about our deliverance in that aspect. So we're going to go to Matthew 13, and we're going to check out 41. And it said, the Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that offend, and them which do iniquity, and cast them into the furnace of fire, and there shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. It says, then shall the righteous shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. Who hath ears to hear, let him hear. Because he's telling you this is going to be deep. The enemy that sold them is the devil, and this is the parable he talks about there. And it's going to be deep. He said the reapers are the angels, and the tares are gathered and burned in the fire. So it shall be at the end of this world. And that world is basically the age that we're living in. All right, so now we're going to finish this with one particular passage that I thought will pretty much close this thing out in a spectacular fashion. And that we're going to go to 4th Esdras. And let me see where I found it at. All right, now let's go here. I'm going to read a passage from you. So let's go into the contract. This is 2nd Esdras, or 4th Esdras, I'm sorry. And, okay, here we go. This is 4th Esdras, and this is a book that he wrote in conjunction to his other books, which you will see in, he's before Job, so he's out of place. He really belongs down there, but they got him up there around Chronicles and Kings and Esther's. And they got Job, who lived way before these two. So they got it all screwed up. Proverbs, who lived before them. Solomon and David lived way before Ezra. So they got it all messed up. But having said that, Ezra is the same guy they're talking about. And he lived during the days of Cyrus, king of Persia. So this was after the Babylonian captivity when he lived. When the Most High had them carry us from Babylon, and the Persians carried us up there where they let us go and go back to Jerusalem at the end of 70 years. Well, at any rate, he gets into a very powerful scripture here, all concerning the prophecy that we've been talking about here, about the Medes and the Persians, and the end of the world in terms of this great battle that we're seeing starting to formulate right now with the Iranians and their sanctions, and how America's demonized them, vilified them, and had them responsible for all the evils of the world. And the Most High is saying that they don't take too kindly to that they're going to come back with a vengeance. But at any rate, in the middle of all of this, in the meantime, this is what's going to be happening in the world. And it says, Yahweh says, behold, speak in the ears of my people the words of the prophecy which I will put in your mouth, and cause them to be on paper, for they are trustworthy and true. And do not fear the plots against you, and do not be troubled by the unbelief of those who oppose you. For every unbeliever shall die in his unbelief. And it says, behold, says Yahweh, I will bring evils upon the world, the sword and famine and death and destruction. For iniquity has spread throughout every land, and their harmful deeds have reached their limit. Therefore, says Yahweh, I will be silent no longer concerning the ungodly deeds which the impiously commit. Neither will I tolerate their wicked practices. Behold, innocent and righteous blood cries out to me, and the souls of the righteous cry out continually. I will surely avenge them, saith Yahweh, and I will receive to myself all the innocent blood from among them. And behold, my people is led like a flock to the slaughter, and I will not allow them to live any longer in the land of Egypt. That's the bondage. That's the bondage they live in. Because remember, we were way out of Egypt in that time. So he's basically saying, I will not let them live in the land of bondage. And we know from 400 years in this place, this is accurate. But I will bring them out with a mighty hand and with an uplifted arm. And I will smite Egypt with plagues, that's America, as before. And I will destroy all its land. Let Egypt mourn and its foundations, and the plague of chastisement and the punishment that Yahweh will bring upon it. It says, let the farmers that till the ground mourn, because their seed shall fail, and their trees shall be ruined by the blight and the hail and by the terrible tempest. It says, alas, look at that word again, for the world and for those who live in it. Meaning that, oh my goodness, this is going to be bad for them. For the sword of misery draw near to them, and nation shall rise up and fight against nation. This is all prophetic. And the words of the swords in their hands. And there shall be unrest among men, growing stronger against one another. And they shall in their might have no respect for their king or the chief of their leaders. This is so accurate you can't even imagine. Every nation on earth got some kind of upheaval and some kind of conflict going in their nation, either with other nations or their people protesting against their government. And we know this from America. They have no respect for their king here. And for a man will desire to go into a city and shall not be able to. Isn't that the Mexicans? Isn't that the refugees from Libya and Europe and all of those from Nigeria that are going in there and they won't let them come into Europe and deporting them? He says, because of the pride, the city shall be in confusion, and the houses shall be destroyed, and the people shall be afraid. And man shall have no pity upon his neighbors, but shall make an assault upon their houses with the sword and plunder the goods. This is the violence we're seeing in America, running down in home invasions because of the hunger for bread and because of the tribulation. I said the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and they get more desperate and they get more violent. Behold, Yahweh says, Yahweh, I will call together all the kings of the earth to fear me, from the rising of the sun from the south and the east and from Lebanon, to turn and repay what they have given them. I mean, he gonna get justice on them. And the justice they have done to my elect unto this day, now he's getting into us, Just as they have done to my elect until this day will I do. And I will repay into their bosom, says Yahweh Elohim. My right hand will not spare them, the sinners, and my sword shall not cease from those who shed innocent blood on the earth. So all those wars and all of this stuff that we were fighting wars for other people in their own greed and their own self-motivation or self-motivating intentions and business deals and all of that. He said, a fire will go forth from his wrath, and I will consume the foundations of the earth and the sinners like straw that is kindled. And woe to those who sin and do not observe my commandments, saith Yahweh. I will not spare them. Depart, you faithless children. And that's all of the people who do not believe that we are going to be delivered, and that we are the children of the Most High, and that your Messiah is not a white man named Jesus. He's saying he don't want you around. You pollute. He says, and Yahweh knows all who transgress against him. Therefore he will hand them over to death and slaughter. For now calamities have come upon the whole earth, and you shall remain in them. For Yahweh will not deliver you, because you have sinned against him. And this is what we mean about all of those who got over here and started acting worse than we did when we were over there. And he says, behold, a terrifying sight. And this is where we get into it. And he says, the nations of the dragons of Arabia. The nations of the dragons of Arabia. Well, where's he getting that at? Let's break into the context. The dragons of Arabia. Let's go to Psalms 83. Right? And it says, lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up thy head. Lifted up the head. And they have taken crafty counsel against thy people and consulted against thy hidden ones. And they have said, come, let us cut them off from being a nation, that the name of Yasharal or Israel may be no more in remembrance. They have consulted together with one consent, meaning this is an alliance between these nations, and they are confederate against thee. And we know that with all of the Middle Eastern nations and all of those nations that we went into captivity, that we are still there from the times of the Assyrians. They were all confederate against thee. Now, where this comes about, he talks about the dragons of Arabia. Well, let's count them. Edom, that would be the land of Israel, that the Jews came over and lived over there. Ishmael, Moabites, Jordanians, Saudi Arabians, Hagarenes, Ammon, Iraqis, all of them that live over there, Yemenis, the Palestinians, which is Philistines. Now let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it says that these are all of them, and after the semicolon, he's saying that they got together to help the children of Lot. The children of Lot was righteous. Lot was righteous, but all of his sons, and everybody that descended after him sinned because they married or they had sex with their father when they thought the world was destroyed at Sodom and Gomorrah, and all of the children are made out of, what they call that? When you have incest, when you have sex with your children, well, they were all incestuous relationships. That's why they're so crazy. They say that the Ishmaelites are wild men with every man a hand against his brother. Well, at any rate, this is 10 nations is significant because of why? Let's look at what Revelation talks about when it gets into the beast. And he said, and I stood upon the sands of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads, and having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns. All right. Now let's look at what he did in this one. Now he says here, now there appeared a wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and the 7 crowns were upon his heads. So that means the 7 crowns at this point, meaning the kingdom, were in their hands when it was on the heads. Now in 13, it says that the crowns are on the horns, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon the heads the name of blasphemy. Okay, now let's find out who the heads was. I just counted out the 10 horns to you, and they are in Arabia. And he said that he was stood upon the sand of the sea, and ain't nothing. But when you go out to the Arabian seas, that's all it is sand and seas, on their beaches. And he rose up out of them. So apparently that's where they're referring to. But let's go into the 7 heads. And this is Revelation here. So the 7 heads, let's count them. Shem, Ham, and Japheth, they were righteous because they were spared from the flood. But what about the sons? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are all European nations. And for the last 2,000 years, until the Psalms 83 crowd came into power with the prince and the king of Saudi Arabia, and that happened in 1945. That's when the crowns went from the heads to the horns. I don't know why it's missing this thing. All right. Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the rest of the crowd. Ammon, Jordan, Amalek, that's Syrians. So these were all those who took over afterwards. And you got to remember, they didn't even become a nation again until 1917 when World War I destroyed the Ottoman Empire. So these are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So those are your 10 horns. Now let's continue back with Esdras. So the dragons of Arabia, he's saying that all of those nations I just read out to you, except for maybe the Philistines and the Syrians, they're all getting, Most High has been attacking them one by one. But the ones that are surviving are the Saudi Arabians, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and all of those. And he said after this, and you think about it, after this attack that they had, that they're blaming it on Iran that just happened last week, in the middle part of September, that they destroyed 50% of their oil production by destroying and sending missiles to destroy their wells. So they're trying to blame it on them, even though the Yemenis said it was them. So the dragons of Arabia, which would be Saudi Arabia, and just the fact that he calls them dragons tells you that we're on the right track. And he said, shall come out with many chariots, and from the day they set out, shall their hissing spread over the earth, so that all who hear them and fear them tremble. We read about that when we were reading in Enoch, when they will thrust themselves against those of the east. But they haven't got to the Iranians yet. This is what's going to stir them up. But this is where the judgment comes, to where the Most High talks about Jeremiah and Isaiah, about the Iranians and the kings of the Medes that he's going to stir up to destroy Babylon. So it says, and also the Carmonians, raging in wrath. And remember, they've got sanctions on them. They've been strangled. The Most High has been down with them because they've already, before in history, the Iranians through Cyrus and Persia, have yielded. When the Most High come after them, they repent. And you read the story of Nineveh, and those people, they push it far they push it far enough, but they don't go too far. And the Most High deals with that. That's why he's coming with them. Tells you that that in those missiles and all that, the Most High is going to guide them to where they don't miss nothing that they shoot out. And when it comes to the dragons of Arabia, these 10 horns, and Babylon, he's saying that He's going to make sure that all of their weaponry is going to operate functional and function properly and perfectly. Well, anyway, it says the Carmonians raging in wrath shall go forth like wild boars. If you ever think about a wild pig in the forest, they'll attack you, and they savages. And with great power shall they come and engage them in battle. Who? They're going to engage the Saudi Arabians in battle. Those nations of Psalms 83. And how to prove the Carmonians is Iran? Let's look at that in Google. Let's Google that. Ancient Carmania. Okay. Carmania. It's an old Persian. See? Same area that Iran is in today. Remember, Iraq's there, Iran's here. In modern day Iran. See, this is the Arabian Peninsula. Remember that? Tigris and Euphrates. Iraq's on the other side of the Euphrates. Or the Tigris, I mean. And this is Iran. This is Carmania. Persia, Carmania. So this isn't playing. This is not a joke. Parthia. Remember, he's going to thrust himself near the Parthians and the Medes. That's it. They used to call it Bactria. All right, so let's continue. So he says, now these nations of Arabia shall come out with many chariots, and from that day they shall set out. And their hissing shall spread upon the earth, so that all who hear them shall fear and tremble. And also the Carmonians raging in wrath, the Iranians, shall go forth like wild boars in the forest, and with great power shall they come, and engage them in battle. And they shall devastate a portion of the land of the Assyrians with their teeth. And the Assyrians is all this land. When you look at ancient Assyria, the Assyrians ruled all of this land. Turkey, Egypt, all the way over to Asia. It says that his King Cyrus's empire, which this is India over here. That's the little point shows that's the other side of India. It says it went from India to Ethiopia, which is down here. So his empire, the Assyrian Empire, was all of this. All right. All right, so let's continue. And it says, and then the dragons, remembering their origin, shall become still stronger, meaning they're going to get a second wind. And it says, now, if they can combine in great power and turn to pursue them, then these shall be disorganized and silenced by their power, and shall turn and flee. And it says, and from the land of the Assyrians, an enemy in ambush shall beset them and destroy one of them. And fear and trembling shall come upon their army, and indecision upon their kings. So he's saying the Carmanians are going to destroy one. I don't know if that's Qatar or Saudi Arabia, but from looking at the prophecies concerning Moab, you see that with Moab in Minor Prophets. I hate when they do that. Moab. All right, now let's look at that in the Minor Prophets, because I'm looking for Obadiah specifically. I'm looking for Obadiah specifically. All right? He says, send a fire upon Moab and devour the palaces of Kiriath. And Moab shall die with tumult, and with shouting, and with the sound of a trumpet. So he's telling you the Saudi Arabians and the Moabites. Because you notice from the palaces, them oil cats are the only ones over there with palaces. Don't get it twisted. All right, now it says now the Carmanians are going to be in this, so they're going to try to turn the pursuer. And they said, then these shall be disorganized and silenced by their power, and shall turn and flee. And from the land of the Assyrians the enemy shall ambush, and shall beset them and destroy one of them. And shall fear and trembling shall come upon their army, and indecision upon the kings. And it says, behold, clouds from the east, and from the north to the south, and their appearance is very threatening, full of wrath and storm. So they're saying that the Carmanians are going to have to get on their heels for a minute, because the Assyrians are going to remember. I'm sorry, there. Pause. Let me pause for the call. So anyway, from the land of the Assyrians, an enemy in ambush shall beset them and destroy one of them, and fear and trembling shall come upon their army, and indecision upon their kings. And it says that the cloud from the east and from the north to the south, and their appearance is very threatening, full of wrath and storm. And this is what he's saying. And now the other nations are going to get involved in it. This is a replaying of World War III. And he said, and they shall dash one against another, and shall pour out heavy tempest upon the earth, and their own tempest. And there shall be blood from the sword as high as a horse's belly. And we read that up. They call it a horse's bridle in Revelation. All right, let's go there. Let's go to there. Horse's bridle. All right, now let's go to Revelation. I believe that's where it is. I don't know why I did that. There you go with that Paul letter crap again. All right, horse's bridle. Did I spell it right? Okay, let's put horses in. All right. Okay. Let's see. And the wine press. From blood to him to death, and the power was given to him. Hold on. Pale horse, and the wine press trodden, and it came out of the wine, even the horse. Here it go. It says, and the wine press was trodden without the city, meaning outside of the city. Let's go to that. And another angel, and he said, an angel thrust his sickle into the earth, and gathered the vine of the earth, and cast it into the great wine press of the wrath of God. So meaning that he let them all there. And you read about that in the prophecies of Isaiah and Jeremiah, where he says, I'm going to put fish hooks in your jaws and bring you to my land. And there he going to plead with you. That's what he means. He going to bring you there and judge you. And he said the wine press was trodden outside of the city, and blood came out of the wine press, even unto a horse's bridle, by the space of 1,600 furlongs. So they give you the distance how long the blood was flowing. That's going to be a bloody, bloody day. Whew. Okay, now it says, let's continue, 35. And he said, and they shall dash one against another, and pour out heavy tempest upon the earth, and upon their own tempest, and there shall be blood from the sword as high as a horse's belly, and a man's thigh, and a camel's hock. So that means up to a man's thigh. Wow. I guess a man's thigh and a horse's bridle is about the same distance. Anyway, And there shall be fear and trembling, great trembling upon the earth. And those who see that wrath shall be horror stricken, and they shall be seized with trembling. And after that, heavy storm shall be stirred up from the south, and from the north, and from another part of the west. All right, and the winds of the east shall prevail over the cloud that was raised in wrath, and shall dispel it. So that means whoever comes out after him, the winds from the east, which if you read here, it tells you that the Most High dried up the Euphrates to prepare the way for the kings of the east. That's in Revelation. Let's find that. He said, the sixth angel poured his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. See that? And that's what he's doing. He's gathering them together for the battle of the great Almighty. That's powerful. And he says, and he gathered them together in a place called Armageddon. That's the valley of Megiddo. So that means this fight will take place outside of Israel. That's what Megiddo and Jericho is. It's right outside of Israel, in between Lebanon and Syria and Jerusalem or Judah. Well, let's keep going, because America is coming up. So that means that these nations from the east, which is probably, in my opinion, would have to be the Turkey, because let's look at that in the scriptures before we go on, so we give you an idea who these nations are. Ararat. Well, I put too many A's in there. Right? So let's look at the whole Old Testament. Now let's look at that. Jeremiah 51, and you know we read there many times. This is about Babylon. Remember? Destruction of Babylon. This is about I went to this earlier. And he said, set up the standard and blow the trumpet among the nations, prepare the nations against her, and call together against her the kingdoms of Ararat, Armenia, and Ashkenaz. That's Turkey, that's Armenia, and Ashkenaz is where the Jews really come from. And you want to know where the Jews come from? Just to give you an idea, and that show you that this is all on the east of where they come from. Let's look at ancient Khazaria. All right, ancient Khazar. I don't think they even called it Khazaria. Ancient Khazars. Ancient Khazar. All right, the Khazars. Let's go there. All right, I don't know why they tried to play with me about it, but okay, it's Persian. All east of it. Let's look at that map. Here's the Middle East. Tigris and Euphrates. All of them are east of that. So they're preparing the way for these kings. That's Afghanistan, Pakistan. I have no idea who of them in there, but I know Ashkenaz is part of the Khazar Ashkenaz ancestry. See that? This is where they come from. And they can try to lie all they want, but I read the Ashkenazis in the Table of Nations. Khazars ain't in there, but this is. So that means that Khazaria was named after they were Ashkenazis. So they can't try to put the cart before the horse on that one. You're busted. You're busted. Anyway, it says now, The land shall tremble and sorrow, and for every purpose of Yahweh shall be performed against Babylon, to make the land of Babylon in desolation without an inhabitant. And I read that part before. So let's continue back in Esdras. All right. Now, you see that the blood is up to a horse's bridle. All right. And he says, now, winds from the east shall prevail over that cloud that was raised in wrath, and shall dispel it. And the tempest that was to cause destruction by the east wind shall be driven violently toward the south and the west. And great and mighty clouds full of wrath and tempest shall rise to destroy all the earth and its inhabitants. It's going to be a mighty battle. And shall pour out upon every high and lofty place a terrible tempest. And tempest just like a storm, a really bad storm, but this one includes fire and death. And it says, now fire and hail and flying swords. So that's bullets and missiles and every projectile that you can think of. And floods of water, that all fields and all streams may be filled with the abundance of those waters. So they're going to destroy some geography. And they shall destroy cities and walls and mountains and hills and trees of the forest and the grass and of the meadows and their grain. And here we go. And he says, now they shall go on steadily. And remember, we read about the Medes. Think about that. Remember, the Medes is in here too. He raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes. All right, now the Ashkenazis and the Ararats, the Turkeys. All right? And it says, set up the standard in the land and draw the trumpet among the nations and prepare the nations against her and call against her the kingdoms of Ararat, Mini, and Ashkenaz. Appoint a captain against her and cause the horses to come up as rough caterpillars and prepare against her the nations with the kings of the Medes, the captains thereof, and all the rulers thereof, and all the land of his dominion. So that means that everything under Iran and every one of his affiliates, or every one of the nations allied with her, are coming after Babylon. He said, they shall go on steadily to Babylon and shall destroy her. As we know, like I said, Esdras is speaking this prophecy to Babylon. Babylon was fallen by the time Esdras was alive. The children of Israel went from Babylon under Nebuchadnezzar to Cyrus and Persia. So the Most High was showing him a prophecy of this Babylon. And they shall come to her and surround her, and they shall pour out the tempest and all its wrath upon her. Then the dust and smoke shall go up to heaven. Remember that? He said that the smoke shall reach the heavens from the smoke of her burning. And all that are about her shall wail over her. Remember we read that now in Revelation 18? This is confirmation. And he said, those who survive shall serve those who have destroyed her. So they're saying that they're going to be, those who survive are going to come back and they'll still be under the rulership of the Asians, but we get delivered. Remember, he takes us out of here, so he ain't talking about us. And he said, you, Asia, who share in the glamour of Babylon and the glory of her person, who are they talking about? That's Japan, China, all them Asian nations. They always want to be like her. Woe to you, you miserable wretch, for you have made yourself like her. You have decked out your daughters in harlotry to please and glory in your lovers, and you have always who have always lusted after you. You have imitated the hateful harlot, meaning America, in all her deeds and devices. That's technology, and that's in her ways, the rich ways and delicacies they deal with. Therefore, Yahweh says, I will send evils upon you, widowhood, poverty, famine, sword, and pestilence, to lay waste your houses and bring you to destruction and death, And the glory of your power shall wither like a flower when the heat rises that is sent upon you. So China, they get it too. Japan, they get it too. Remember, this judgment is for every single nation on earth. It's just that he's breaking Babylon last. Because he want a special emphasis on her. He says, now, would I have dealt with you so violently, says Yahweh? He said, if you had not always killed my chosen people, exulting and clapping your hands and talking about their death when you were drunk. Trick out the beauty of your face. Wow, that sounds like he's saying trick out. When you trick something out, you hook it up and put makeup and, like they trick out cars. I don't know if that's what he means, but I guess trick and all of that when it comes to prostitution and all that, I guess that's all applicable. He says, now the reward of the harlot is in your bosom. Therefore you receive your recompense. As you will do to my chosen people, says Yahweh, so Yahweh will do to you and will hand you over to adversaries. And your children shall die of hunger, and you shall fall by the sword, and your city shall be wiped out. And all your people who are in open country shall fall by the sword. That's China. A lot of their population is in the open country. The rice fields and the paddies and all that. Excuse me. And those in the mountains and highlands shall perish of hunger. And they shall eat their own flesh and hunger for bread and drink their own blood and thirst for water. It's fair to say this is going to get terrible for them. And this thing shall go on forever. Look at this one. He says, woe to you, Babylon and Asia. Woe to you, Egypt and Syria. So the Most High is telling you in Ezra's, he breaks it all down. So I'm going to stop here because this video, I don't want to go too long, so people will be discouraged from watching it. So this Babylon is extensive, this study of it and her destruction. And I hope that you learned a lot of things, that this is not something that I'm just making up and coming into you. If you find this video, that means that the Most High has not answered your prayer and you knocked on the door, because you won't hear this in other speakers and other teachers or so-called teachers. They just don't have it. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, and I believe it's because most of them claim to want to know the Most High, but deep in their heart, they really don't, because it makes them have to change certain things about them that we've learned here in Babylon that is, in some cases, just too hard to shake, like the reliance on money and wealth and trying to preserve yourself, self-preservation and those things. So these things, you have to taught in terms of living in the spirit to leave all those cares behind. And we'll pick this up in the following video. So thanks for watching, and shalom, and I hope to see you in the day of our deliverance. Shalom.